My phone buzzed on the rustic wooden counter of the tasting room, right as I was finishing a batch bottling of our reserve Pinot Noir. The voice on the other end was crisp, professional, and entirely unbothered by my shock. Amelia Vance? This is Marcus Thorne with Regional Title Investigations. I'm looking into a deed transfer on the historic Crestview Vineyard acreage. I stared out the window at the rows of vines my grandfather had planted with his own hands, acres that my father had just officially handed over to my golden child brother at Sunday dinner. Only, the legal paperwork told a much darker story. That Sunday dinner had started like any other, heavy with the scent of roasted garlic and my father's quiet judgment. I had spent the entire week reviewing contracts at my new law firm, running myself ragged to prove that a female attorney could build a legacy from scratch. But in our household, legacy only ever flowed down one specific line, straight to my younger brother, Ethan. Ethan had never worked a hard day in his life, coasting through college on our father's credit cards while flashing a $1 million smile that somehow excused every failure. We were sitting around the mahogany dining table when my father cleared his throat, tapping his wine glass with a silver spoon. His eyes beamed with unadulterated pride as he looked across the table at Ethan, completely bypassing me as if I were part of the wallpaper. Without warning, he dropped the bombshell that would fracture my entire world. He announced, with a booming, triumphant laugh, that he had officially transferred the title deed of the historic Crestview Vineyard over to Ethan as an early inheritance gift. My chest tightened into a knot. Crestview wasn't just a piece of land. It was my mother's dying wish, entrusted to me because I was the only one who actually knew how to keep the vines alive through a drought. When I tried to speak, reminding him of our agreement and the countless weekends I spent managing the estate books, my father just waved his hand dismissively. He told me that a woman with a high-powered law career had no business managing dirt and vines, claiming that Ethan needed the financial security more because he was looking to expand his lifestyle. The sheer injustice burned behind my eyes, but I kept my composure, swallowing the lump in my throat while Ethan smirked over his roast beef. I told myself it was just old-fashioned stubbornness, a blind spot my father had always possessed when it came to his favorite son. Little did I know, that Sunday announcement wasn't just a glaring display of family favoritism. It was the opening salvo in a calculated, predatory theft designed to erase my entire existence from the family legacy, setting the stage for a betrayal so deep it would require a total war to survive. The professional voice on the phone belonged to Marcus Thorne, and his next words sent a cold shiver straight down my spine. He asked if I was aware that my signature had been notarized on a quitclaim deed transferring my half-interest in the vineyard to Ethan 6 months prior. My hands went completely numb. I hadn't signed any deed, nor had I ever stepped foot in that notary's office. Marcus explained that title investigations routinely flag irregularities when multi-million-dollar land transfers happen entirely off-market between close relatives, especially when digital signatures show timestamps from midnight. Panic and fury warred inside me as I hung up the phone and immediately pulled up the county assessor's online portal. My fingers trembled over the keyboard as I punched in the parcel number for Crestview Vineyard. There it was in black and white, a digital document stamped and sealed, bearing a scrawled signature that bore a pathetic resemblance to my own legal cursive. But the date of filing was the most damning piece of evidence of all. It had been officially filed on the exact same Tuesday that I had spent 12 grueling hours at the county courthouse representing a pro bono client. I hadn't just been backstabbed at Sunday dinner. I had been systematically set up while I was miles away, working an honest living. I downloaded the PDF copy of the deed, zooming in on the notary seal and the witness signatures. The notary public listed was an obscure firm located downtown, run by a man I had never met in my life. A cold, calculated realization began to dawn on me. This wasn't a careless family mistake or a simple misunderstanding over an inheritance. This was a premeditated, legally binding fraud executed with clinical precision. My own father and my brother had conspired to forge my signature, utilizing my absence and my legal background against me, assuming I would be too busy or too intimidated to look closely at public records. They thought they had successfully erased me from the land my grandfather built. They had no idea that by pulling that single thread, they had just handed an attorney the exact weapon needed to unravel their entire empire. Determined to uncover the full extent of the deception, I spent the next 48 hours combing through public records, historical county archives, and family financial files that had been gathering dust in our basement. My training as an attorney gave me the exact tools I needed to follow the paper trail, and what I found made my stomach turn. This forgery wasn't a spontaneous act born out of greed at Sunday dinner. It was the culmination of a 3-year conspiracy. I discovered a series of hidden loan modifications, unauthorized lines of credit taken out against the Vineyard's equity, and covert applications for agricultural development grants. My father had quietly appointed Ethan as the primary corporate representative of our family trust while I was away at law school, systematically stripping away my voting rights and corporate authority piece by piece. They had used my name as a co-borrower on high-interest commercial loans to fund Ethan's lavish lifestyle, buying luxury cars and high-end real estate under the guise of Vineyard expansion. Every single dollar they drained was siphoned away from the land, leaving Crestview teetering on the brink of foreclosure. They hadn't just stolen my inheritance. They had weaponized my identity to dig a financial grave, fully intending to let me take the fall when the creditors finally came knocking for their money. The heavy oak gates of Crestview Vineyard swung open as I pulled my sedan onto the gravel driveway, my pulse hammering in my ears like a war drum. I didn't have to wait long before a shiny black SUV tore up the lane, spraying gravel in all directions. Out stepped my father and Ethan, their faces flushed with arrogant confidence, clutching a fresh set of padlock chains and legal notices. They had expected to catch an emotional, broken woman crying over her lost legacy. Instead, they found me standing calmly on the veranda, leaning against the wooden railing with a manila folder tucked securely under my arm. Ethan flashed his trademark, condescending grin, marching right up the steps as if he already owned the ground beneath our feet. He told me I was trespassing on private property, pointing aggressively at the forged deed tucked inside his leather portfolio, like a badge of absolute authority. My father stood a few paces behind him, wearing an expression of cold, calculated disappointment, muttering that I should have known my place instead of fighting a losing battle. They thought they held all the cards, completely unaware that the game had already changed. Without breaking eye contact, I unzipped my folder, slid out the official report from the title investigator alongside the initial findings from the forensic audit, and held them out for them to see. I told them in a voice cold as ice that locking me out of my own land was going to look fantastic as Exhibit A in a federal wire fraud and identity theft indictment. The color drained from Ethan's face instantly, his arrogant smirk instantly warping into sheer panic as he looked down at the documents. My father took a sharp, desperate step forward, his hands trembling as the terrifying reality of what they had built finally came crashing down around them. The legal fallout hit them like a freight train, dismantling their carefully constructed house of cards in a matter of days. Armed with the title investigator's report and the forensic audit, my attorney moved swiftly, filing emergency injunctions that froze every asset my father and Ethan had manipulated. The fraudulent deeds were officially nullified by the court, restoring full and undisputed ownership of Crestview Vineyard right back to my name where it belonged from the very beginning. Ethan's glittering lifestyle imploded overnight as his creditors swarmed, and the luxury properties he had acquired using my stolen identity were seized to cover their mounting debts. When the full extent of the forgery and corporate tampering came to light, the local authorities stepped in, converting our family dispute into a very real criminal investigation for wire fraud and identity theft. My father tried desperately to call me, leaving tear-soaked voicemails begging for mercy and claiming it was all just a family misunderstanding, but I never picked up. The day the final settlement papers cleared, I stood alone on the veranda of the tasting room, watching the sun dip below the rolling hills of green vines. The heavy weight of betrayal that had suffocated me for months finally evaporated into the warm evening air, replaced by an unshakable sense of peace. I had built my career from the ground up, survived their calculated treachery, and protected the legacy my grandfather left behind. I poured myself a glass of our finest reserve wine, raised it to the quiet horizon, and smiled. Let them keep their excuses and their shattered schemes. This land was mine. My future was entirely unwritten, and for the first time in my life, that was more than enough.